Just Breaking Bad is a story of a high school chemistry teacher getting cancer and earning money through making drugs with his chemistry skills. His justification for selling drugs is to earn money. This plants a perception that selling drugs is a lucrative business, also while portraying other drug dealers in the series, such as Gus Fring, as cool. When Breaking Bad is one of the most widely known TV series in the US, its impact on people is significant. This sort of glorification on the criminal way of life does nothing but form harm perception in people's mind. So proud to propose two things in my speech. First, I'll move on to some points of framing, and then move on to our two arguments on how this glorifies the crime life and how this reinforces stereotypes. With that, let's move on to some points of framing. First, what does the glorification of the criminal way of life look like? This is showing and romanticizing the criminal way of life, doing illegal things like selling drugs and whatnot. Notice how it's not just about portraying the criminal way of life, it's about glorifying. So even if a TV series shows a tragic end of a criminal, if the process of the crime, such as earning money through drugs sales, looks cool, that is considered as glorification. Why do TV shows have these scenes? As noted in the info side as well, it is to entertain. When the main character or villain of a story is portrayed as weak, no one will want to watch the show. If the main character always gets beat up, no one will obviously want to watch that. This is to say that the main character is likely shown as a powerful, at least in some parts of the show. And if the character is weak, at least there will be some kind of character development. An example is how Walter White grows from a nerdy chemistry teacher to a brutal drug dealer and murderer in Breaking Bad. The fun that audience see from these TV shows is being able to be in the main character's shoes. For example, when you watch certain movies or series, the reason you get angry when the main character does, or when you feel happy when the main character does something well, is all because you try to relate yourself into the story for more fun. This is similar to how people read books by putting themselves into the shoes of the main character or like antagonist of the stories. But next, how do people actually watch these shows? The most conventional and common way of watching would be like watching an entire series from Netflix and whatnot. But we also want to know that given the rise of short form content, where YouTubers post short movie clips, many others also get the most entertaining parts of the show, which is likely the scene of the crime, as that is the essence of a crime show. What's our counterfactual? We want a world where the criminal way of life in TV series is portrayed more as miserable, depressing, and having nothing to gain from. If anything, we want to stigmatize it. We do not want any glorified deception of the criminal way of life in TV series, even if that means that there's going to be the next Breaking Bad. With that, before I move on, is there POI? If there's not, I'll just move on to my arguments. First argument, how this glorifies the life of crime. The premise of this argument is that the glorification of the criminal in TV series have led to negative influence normalizing crime. Why is this true? I think when showing the life of a criminal, the shows tend to portray why the criminal began to commit crimes and justifying it. For example, showing how poorly treated the Joker was and how that led to the Joker's murder. And I think that this already proves to you why many people who watch are actually likely to be vulnerable to also being justifying their ways of like maybe crime. So maybe being a drug dealer because they're poor, or maybe opting into murder because they really have hatred for one individual. Why will people likely get negative influence? We don't want to be too radical to say that an average chemistry teacher will suddenly turn into Walter while watching Breaking Bad, but rather our influence is more about the perception people form about crimes. When people see real life drug lords, people think of them as cool, thinking of drug sales as not like a big of an issue. Or but like when they're offered to try out a drug, they take it or taking the drug out of like here. They take the drug out of curiosity. That what will it feel like? What will like cocaine feel like? What will like Mariana feel like? As in shows like Narcos, drugs are seen to make one feel good. This is also prevalent in like Euphoria and whatnot. People of all ages, not just children, are vulnerable to this influence. This counters opposition sport on how children do not have access to these kind of media. But just because someone's an adult doesn't mean that he or she is perfectly rational. They still get influenced by social perception. If adults were so rational, I don't know why there's so many smokers in School, as people know the harms of it, right? But the impact here is that there's forms of narrative that how crime life is cruel and this normalizes violence. This is obviously detrimental because the moment you make like maybe being a murderer really, really cool, this leads to many people opting into that crime because simply put, they feel that it's cool. And that is literally what the TV show is doing. And I think given that people are very easily swayed by like certain like perceptions or a certain like framing in like TV shows, it's extremely likely that there will be a narrative that crime is cool, or if at the very least there's going to be some kind of narrative that normalizes violence, and as a result, I think it's very likely that more crimes are committed, or at the very least, violence is normalized. So if you walk down the streets and see like this one person murdering, you're more likely to be a bystander rather than help because you've already seen this so many times in this violent media. So we think that this normalizes crime, which is obviously a tangible harm here, but also Opposition cannot try to mitigate our harms by stating that many people first don't watch this, but two don't have access because, as I already told you, due to the rise of short form content, even if series show negative consequences of a crime at the and in opposition's best case, we that viewers think of a popular scene where crime life is mostly glorified. So we don't think that this point stands. But even if that premise was not true, unlike YouTube or other social media, violent clips are not filtered out well, even with regulations, because of the high amount of media that exists. So there are clearly ways for all people to watch these films. Before I move on, I'll take your POI.
Are people that gullible to do drugs or murder someone that can completely impact their future when they know in society and social perception, as you tell these individuals that it is wrong because a Netflix series character does it?
Okay, under your characterization, then there will be no crimes in South Korea. We don't think that premise is true. People were so rational as you characterized, and we want to see that the high crime is in the USA, Mexico, etc. Given that people already people in South Korea deal drugs like to have a living or like just commit crimes because of for the sake of revenge. We don't think that your characterization of people being rational and people being like shocked by violence determines crimes in the first place. Second, on moving on to argument on stereotypes, the premise is that the glorification of crimes reinforces stereotypes. Why is this true? Because it is merely a fact that stereotypes exist in the South Korea. When you think about what drug country has the most gun violence, it is the USA. If you think about who deals drugs the most, it will be Latinos, right? The issue is that these TV shows still are vulnerable to these stereotypes because the creators also have these stereotypes from the availability heuristic, insofar that viewers of the TV shows will also be vulnerable to these stereotypes, especially if they don't live in the US or nations where drug dealing or gun violence is common, i.e. a Chinese person could be reinforced to the stereotype that these groups are responsible for some crimes. So maybe if like gun violence, they would say, oh, it's all because of the African Americans. This is exclusive with the glorification of TV shows that glorify the crime life because first of the demand, these TV shows are very entertaining and popular, but two, although there are many other types of TV shows with crime involved, we think that these films have the most exposure to what crime looks like because the literal plot is crime. But the harm is that this perpetrates discrimination against minority groups, i.e. hate crimes against Latinos, or maybe police brutality, thinking that an African American has a gun even if they actually don't, and whatnot. I think this is already prevalent in the South. So this shows you that the glorification of media has done more harm than good. So proud to propose.
Maleficent and Princess Aurora, the villain in the story of Sleeping Beauty, is very clear. However, when we watch the original movie showing Aurora as the protagonist and Maleficent as a villain, we never see Maleficent's story. We only see her as a flat paper figure with only one personality, which is evil. Why do you think in the status quo we see more and more of the villain stories of popular movies and shows? It is because it's not only entertaining to viewers, it also has significantly positive impacts. When you watch Maleficent, you learn as the viewer that there's always more than one side to the story. They do not watch Maleficent and think it's okay to curse a baby. They learn that although people do evil things and bad things, there are reasons behind everyone's actions and that everyone has their own story. No matter how bad it is, it's never okay to only show one side of something as a definite good or bad in any world. Every living person in every situation is not 2D. Life is much more complex than that. Of course, we cannot tell people that the Nazis were good or that murder is justified, but by glorifying the lives of criminals on TV, this is not what we're doing. Just because we glorify something does not mean that these criminals' wrongdoings are shown as something that's just and true. By the end of these series, the criminals are usually punished. Now, the prime minister said that even in their world, portraying is okay, but that glorifying is bad. Exactly. In their counterfactual, you still have the portrayal of criminal ways of life. The only difference is that you don't show it as something good, since the prime minister defined glorification as showing something as admirable or powerful. But like I said in my introduction of this speech, the impacts of this are detrimental because I will go on to explain this later. But basically, what does glorification even look like? It looks like the criminal way of life that certain characters are living when it's in an attractive way. Similarly, look at the status quo. In many movie series, there's less emphasis on the punishment or the wrongdoing of the criminal. But more specifically, how does the status quo look like? We see age limitations in majority of the movies that glorify the criminal way of life in bad series, like Breaking Bad. It's R-rated. Note that in our world, there are limitations set for different age groups. Now, before I move on to my first argument, yes, I'll take the POI.
What kind of benefit do you get by watching Breaking Bad or Narcos, where you see the other side of the story about how profitable drug sales is?
I'm actually going to be answering that question. But even in your world, you're limiting the glorification of these criminal ways of life in series, not in movies or other artistic forms. So in Justin Bieber's Hold On music video, he threatens a banker with a gun in order to save his girlfriend who has cancer to pay her medical bills. You would still have that on your side. And further, I'll be explaining the benefits of having this in our status quo. Now, the first argument is that the impacts of glorifying criminal ways of life in the status quo does not have significantly negative impacts. We see numerous layers within this overarching point. Number one, from the get-go, it's very important to recognize who are the main stakeholders in this debate. That's to say, who watches these criminal TV shows. We define these shows, and the examples in the info slide were R-rated media like Breaking Bad. In the status quo, young children are not able to watch these R-rated movies because they have very moldable young minds, and even if they somehow gain access to it, their parents are very likely to stop them, because undoubtedly children being exposed to crime and gore will have negative impacts. However, these children are not the stakeholders of this debate, so this is a very less than 1% chance that they will come into contact with such R-rated material. So now talking about the real stakeholders, these are adults over 18 years of age that are eligible to watch these shows that glorify the criminal ways of life. Why is it highly unlikely that they will be heavily swayed by these TV shows? Because they've gone through years of schooling and where they are taught the basic lessons about crime, abuse, drugs, and morals. There is no way that the government can argue against this. It's mandated by law that every student is taught from elementary to high school for more than 12 years, which is mandatory education about the harms of alcohol abuse and criminal deeds. So with this said, the people that grow up to become criminals and do crime exist in both worlds, not just ours. Everyone is taught the horrors and consequences of crime in both worlds. So this assertion that just because we have series showing glorification of crime in the status quo will not lead to more crime. And also, realistically, in society, it's highly unlikely that people will try to copy the deeds of the lives that they see on screen, because people know it's fiction. It's something that only exists in, and something that really they know of the negative impacts that will come if they quit their job and start selling drugs. And they know that society will never accept them because they learned about it in school. So there's a very low chance that they will go into the world and actually start copying the things that they see in these R-rated materials. Yes?
If it's true that years of school, if years of schools can prevent crimes, why do criminals who went through mandatory education still commit crimes?
Because these are people that even after getting, let's characterize criminals for a minute. Criminals, these are people that usually like more than 50% of the time have grown up around crime. They've seen crime and they've been exposed to these situations. Of course, just by a teacher telling you that something is bad, not everyone is going to stop doing it. But just because we have other TV shows, R-rated TV shows that they can't even watch when they're young, showing glorified ways of life, that's not going to increase the amount of crime. That is what we're saying. And you also have that on your side. And also, does the expression and glorification of crime truly not exist in your world? Short answer, it still does. The motion states that this house regrets the glorification of criminal ways of life in certain series. Not all forms of art and expression. Like I said before, Justin Bieber's Hold On music video. These pop artists, they have a huge fan base, and even in their world, these types of songs and music videos exist. So how can they assert that just because series that show the glorification of... When I watched Justin Bieber's Hold On music video, where it shows him threatening a banker with a gun in order to get more funds for his sick cancer girlfriend who's suffering from the lack of medical fees that they have, I don't think that it's okay to go out to a banker and steal and threaten someone with a gun. There are good impacts of this glorification, because whether it be in Breaking Bad or that music video, the common trend here in this mass media is that they do it, the criminal does it because of something that they hold dear, whether it be making money for their family or protecting someone that they love. So we don't see this as the public and think that these bad deeds are okay, but rather we think and reflect on how important our family is to us, and think of the extent to which people will go to save their loved ones, that they will kill and do bad deeds in order to save the ones that are dear to them. We're able to re-reflect on the important skill of empathy, even with the people that have sinned in the past. This skill is something that we need in order to live through our lives in society. Like a school teacher cannot just go and not listen to a child's why behind why he hit a classmate, although hitting a classmate is wrong. And also another reason why it isn't so bad, the movies that are shown to the public are censored and checked before they are released. Do you think that the government would let a movie be shown in theaters if they deem that people will watch it and suddenly start doing drugs and robbing shops? Now, taking a stance in favor of the glorification of the criminal way of life in certain series might also have the following arguments that my deputy is also going to expand on. Artistic expression. These people, these directors and these actors, they have a right to show their artistic expression, and they have the freedom to explore various themes if they bring happiness to the people that are watching it. And therefore, not only does the status quo not have extremely negative impacts like the proposition is telling you, we also have certain benefits on our side that do not exist on theirs, and therefore very proud to post. Thank you.
Just that the examples on the info slide clearly states Breaking Bad. It's about a high school teacher, chemistry teacher, that got into the world of drug training. It's not that Disney, oh kids and so beautiful, rainbow and sunshine, just like Maleficent, like I don't know, Cruella, that it just portrays like a villain still like cursing a child, right? The examples that are given in the info slide, it's much more related to reality. It's not that fantastical as the opposition side characterized. It's about real crime and how they earn money from it. I think that characterization is clear. But moving on to some more, they basically believe like glorification is just like showing two sides of like an action, right? But we believe glorification is basically romanticizing a crime, romanticizing how people shoot a person with a gun or deal drugs, which are illegal in kind of society, right? They cannot ignore this because the examples on info slides are not as fantastical as Disney or like Cruella or like Maleficent sense. It's about the examples that are actually happening in status quo, right? They talk about age groups, but we basically gave you from our first speaker speech why this won't work. Because firstly, there are ways to cheat. For example, Netflix. Even if I'm a teenager, I can just go into my Netflix and click on my mom's account and I can have access to all the R-rated movies, right? Secondly, on Instagram clips and YouTube clips, these short clips of violent actions go viral. And this basically means that these children can access it even without like these parental like needs, right? So basically these kinds of age group based, we prove that it doesn't work and it does have an impact on in society, right? Basically, if their idea about age group didn't have to work, we should know nothing about Squid Games. We should know nothing about the, what is it, House of Papers or whatnot, right? We basically believe that their characterization is wrong. Now, moving on to their some rebuttals, they basically give an example of Justin Bieber's music video, but we believe this is kind of different from what we are trying to show because music videos are usually short. It's just like 3 minutes. It usually don't show how the criminal's life changed from being normal into heinous, right? It doesn't show how he is punished or how he doesn't go to jail, right? So it basically means since the music videos are so short, it usually is it's usually depicted as being far away from reality. Therefore, even if these kinds of music videos exist on our side, it's likely that these people won't adopt such like criminal mindsets because it's short, it's so derived from like reality, right? We believe their characterization doesn't stand. And even if yes, we have these kinds of like violent music videos, we believe it's irrelevant because of the fact we're talking about these series and right now and the series that are being glorified, right? So we should basically talk about the harms and benefit that comes from the series itself, not music videos, right? The other big idea that they come about is that they show like different point of views from like the reasons behind an action. But first, this is not exclusive, speaker. We have better ways to learn this. We have parents on our side that teach children with like storybooks how the villain will be like failing and how you cannot like go and like slap a friend on the cheek because of the fact that that's not moral, right? But secondly, teachers usually they're educated and usually they know how to listen to both sides of the story before they even become a teacher, right? We believe these kinds of better ways to learn like point of views actually stand better on our side because we do not use the metric of crime to make sure that these people understand that they're like two ways to a story, right? But secondly, even if, okay, they teach people that criminals have lives too, we believe this is toxic because of the fact that they like glorify crime in the action. And if this like having new point of views about a person's action involve people thinking money from drugs is cool, we believe these kinds of points of view doesn't really matter in this debate, and the like the harms of these kinds of glorification is even further, right? Now moving on to some extensions, they basically said that not all people would be like watching these shows and will go bad because they're adults and they're educated. But basically, speaker, we proved that like if their characterization is true, most adults that are educated shouldn't do crime and there should be no crimes in today's society. But seeing that people actually do crime, we believe their characterization doesn't stand. And firstly, we already stated that no, thank you, I'll take it later. We already stated that not all of the people watching these shows will go bad, but instead there's a higher percentage on their side that they will. So let's give some vulnerable stakeholders that are the examples. For example, people in poverty in developing nations who are suffering. They suffering from providing basic needs, even if they had a tinge of guilt from committing crime before they saw the show. If these kinds of shows are on the revolt, then it's likely that they will lean towards life of requisitive crime or enlist to like a criminal organization. Or teenagers being peer pressured to do drugs or to deal them, likely get used to these kind of TV shows and media portrayal of crime and think drug dealing is no big deal. It's cool. And we believe that stakeholders on the brink of living a life of crime, these are the most vulnerable stakeholders on our debate, and they're the ones that are most likely to cross that line when media portrays it as positive like opposition does, right? But even if these like stakeholders don't go bad, we believe the main harm in today's debate, okay, I'll take it later. The main harm in today's debate is that society's perception will change. Let's engage to this. They basically say that they ask about the societal's perception in the POI, and this is the reason why these people won't like commit crimes. But firstly, we basically prove why these shows changes society perception. So it basically makes these kinds of crimes justified. So our first speaker gave the example of a bystander, right? If these kinds of shows go viral, it's likely that these people won't stand up to crime and become a bystander because of the fact that they feel like these crimes are like romanticized and are justified, right? We believe this is the bigger harm. Okay, fine, POI.
Why do crimes occur? What is the reason why people in poverty are more prone to crimes?
Okay, we basically gave you the characterization on their side. When these like crimes are glorified, people think it's no big deal because, for example, Joker gets caught by Batman and gets put in jail, but escapes jail multiple times. People think that the CJ is not a big deal, that these kinds of consequences that come from crime is not a big deal because of the fact that these crimes are romanticized and seen as a money-building like factor, right? These people are likely, because they're desperate, trying to go into these lives of crime because of the fact they want more money, and that could be easily done with drugs or like killing people or something like that, right? We believe that is clearly characterized in our first speaker's speech, right? Now moving on to our third argument, which is harmful impacts on society. As we characterize, these series are usually depicting crime and how like main characters earn money from it. This makes people think that wealth, power, and social status is more important than morality and ethical behaviors. It undermines the justice system because it depicts these criminals as running away free from their crimes, and it depicts the CJ as incompetent or unable. This disrupts the order of the community by showing that villains who are act certain immoral ways don't have to face the consequences and the laws that exist in society, right? It makes the audience empathize towards these villains and not the victims because they don't think like the victim should have justice and get their money back, but feel like the villain actually has justice for actually doing these actions. In the end, this impact in society that it unconsciously spreads a norm towards society that evil can prevail and justice does not matter. So proud to propose.
Let me be the SparkNotes summarizer for the series Breaking Bad, okay? A high school chemistry teacher getting terminal cancer and deciding to turn for drugs because he had to earn money for his family to sustain a life even during such poor and unfortunate times so that his family, his kids, and his wife can living even after he dies. I think this is the actual story that we see in Breaking Bad. This is the actual story that these series with the glorification show. We already see proposition, ignore the actual background story. Extremely proud to oppose. I want to deal with two main things in my speech today. One, some points of rebuttal to why the previous speakers, their reconstruction, the rebuttals does not make sense. But thirdly, to want some extension, rebuilding our first speaker's material. But second of all, addressing our third argument of how the glorification better addresses social commentary. Then first, moving on to some points on rebuttal. I think first of all, kind of feels like government have a huge misunderstanding of what crimes are and how the status quo looks like from the very get-go. Judge, crimes exist in both worlds. Don't let government even try to gaslight you that crime rates in the status quo are the result of the glorification in series. This is just nonsense. I don't think this is actually how it works. Crimes happens in a variety of ways, but I think in the majority of the time, I think if you're from like, for instance, a marginalized group, then you have significantly higher chances of getting worse living conditions, low quality education, or just like more consequences, or just situations where you're more prone to crimes, right? I think the latter will lead to the absence of a proper job or absence of job at all. Even if you have education and so on, I think you still may face the discrimination during the application process and so on. I think there are chances where just because from these like the surroundings or like the impacts of the life you have, there are consequences of where you're much more prone to crime. When this is the case, we think that there are often times where it is inevitable or it's uncontrollable factors that lead these people to commit crimes. But poverty, these kinds of social injustice are evident in both worlds, right? Note that government do not have the fear nor the possibility to say that social injustice doesn't exist in their world. That is literally not how this is not even possible from the first place. Yes, but however, yes, there still will be crimes in our world. Yes, that is something that we admit because crimes will be evident in both worlds. But I think we're able to better address these socio-economic issues behind the crimes, or at least have a better suitable perception against these criminals. And I'll further compare the comparative in our site's extension. But moving on. Second, it seems like proposition thinks that individuals are so gullible that individuals just follow whatever the movies show. Like if movies or Breaking Bad, or if they show that they kill person with the gun, they commit suicide or so on, I think it feels like they think that these individuals just exactly follow what they do. People are aware that movies are different from reality, panel. How is society right now? There's a criminal justice system, there are parents, there are schools, there are institutions, there's the general society that tell you that drugs are bad, that killing and murdering, that kidnapping, raping people are just bad in general. But I think Hannah also knows that there are movies, that the majority of the movies in the status quo, in our world, where it is the criminals that get punished, it's that there are movies that create the criminals that getting punished. This story, this typical traditional movie that we see, this protagonist and antagonist, the superhero killing or like just beating or actually just retributing and stuff to antagonists. And I think if this is the majority of the case, then if this the people we have a balance, right? I think we still can. I think the proposition cannot
POI.
individuals just follow whatever they say. But thirdly, I'll take it up here after my rebuttals. But thirdly, they continue to talk about how young kids have access, to YouTube shorts and so on. However, Hannah, I think we think that this is a parent's responsibility from the first place. Being able to prevent your child to go onto your Netflix account, that's your responsibility as a parent. It's the moral obligation to do the best for your child. But in their world, I think getting rid of for everyone, for the vast majority of the public, to even have this access to such different media entertainment shows, this in and of itself is bad. But fourth of all, you talk about how it doesn't matter how like they talk about how like the background, it doesn't matter the background of these people, that we do not, that they actually don't care about the points or like the behind the scenes of these criminals in the first place, right? Then I think, and this continue to talk about peer pressure for teenagers and so on. But first of all, that is not exclusive. I think peer pressure exists in both worlds. But note that in Breaking Bad, the main character did crime to help his poor family. Like this, usually in a crime, a very small percent of crimes committed are actually because of the psychopath that proposition seems to push. But we can't ignore the situation in which that crime occurred. I suppose since government is saying that people are gullible enough to buy everything that they see on the screen and integrate it into their own lives into society, then by using their logic, since they think that mere TV shows are capable of influencing the whole society, the whole criminal justice system, I suppose in their world, since criminals are only seen for their crime and not the background in which it occurred, courts would ignore the context of the crime and always rule against the defendant. I think this is much more of a worse or unfair criminal justice in the first place. Before I move on, yes, I'll take that.
People watch TV shows for fun, not to empathize. Even if you assume that there is some more perspectives on your side, the crime part that is more fun blurs away the better perspectives you talk about. How still do you have any benefits?
Exactly as you just told us in your POI, that people, even if you take that, people watch TVs for fun. That is exactly why then they're not gonna just like do whatever the TV shows tell you, right? Because they watch for entertainment, because these series are for entertainment purposes. The reason why you watch Breaking Bad on Netflix is because you wanna relax, or maybe just like watch your favorite entertainment show. This is exactly what people are able to know what's reality or not, because it is for fun for the first place, because it is for your own leisure and so on. But moving on to some points on extent I think, further moving, last point of rebuttal, they talk about how anyone can get access to these TV shows and series, but note that this is, as I told you before, it's the duty of the parent to stop this from happening. But note that in their counterfactual, since children can technically get access to anything harmful to their upbringing if they try hard enough, note that like I think we see other alternative, like even worse, in porn sites or so on, are also completely banned, right? I think this is what anything R-rated should be completely banned. I think this is what the government is saying. But moving on to some points on extension, note that this glorification better addresses social commentary. When certain series use the criminal underworld as a backdrop to explore broader social issues, they engage in a form of social commentary that can incredibly be impactful. I think note that within this glorification, these series occur when the protagonist is a criminal, meaning that we pay much more attention to them. We pay the background stories. We know what happens. The reason why we know Walter in the Breaking Bad had cancer. The reason why, because he's using drugs for his family. We know this because he's the protagonist, because it's glorified. When this is the case, what are the impacts here? I think this leads many series to deliver the social economic factors of society that leads to crimes like Breaking Bad, because you're the poor, the status that you were in, right? By depicting the struggles of these characters, these shows that shed light on the systematic issues of poverty and so on that exist in our current society. I think viewers are prompt to consider root causes of crime and to emphasize with those who are marginalized and or at least enfranchised, they will at least have like more spread awareness, or at least have this in mind. But I think the comparative here is that in their world, movies they only show it as a bad guy. Why do movie industry have this incentive to do so in the first place? Because they want more profit, because they want the public's attention, and because if the only stereotypical movie standard structure is the the protagonist killing the antagonist and so on, then they want to show more of the less antagonist story, because they want this scene to be much more broad and so on, right? Then I think the exclusive impact that we give you is that we make the public think more the social injustice that exists, and I think government's counterfactual less ways and alternatives to make this happen. Extremely proud to oppose.
Using Seah's example in our intro, earning money for a family cannot be a justification for drug sales. Drugs destroy many other people's lives. Just because you have to feed your family as Walter White, you cannot take away food from others by selling them and making them addicted to drugs. Seah's intro supporting the crimes of Walter White is the exact reason why we proposed this motion. Seah is a smart debater, but even people like her get to justify the action of criminals like Walter White after watching a SparkNotes summary. Just imagine how brainwashed she will be when she watches the actual Breaking Bad show. Therefore, we say that the negative impacts of these shows are very evident, very proud to propose. 2 points of clarification that I would like to make that brings down most of the opposition side's case before making the questions necessary in this debate. Firstly, this debate is about the TV series. Yes, that is true, but the petty claim from opposition that even if it's not for TV series, that people can still access glorified crime videos, such as from the Justin Bieber's music video or whatever, is irrelevant to this debate. If it is true that Justin Bieber has that sort of threatening video to the society and has the exact same harm that we told you about, we would regret that as well, but that is not simply the subject of this debate, and therefore we would like to focus on these TV series for the purpose of this debate. Second point of clarification is that on the principled but under-mechanized claim of artistic expression that the first talks about for like a minute or so, we don't see why exactly artistic expression is so significant as it's not an absolute value that outweighs any of the claims that we gave you here. Germany prohibits people from having Nazi flags, even though based on opposition side's logic, that may be considered as an artistic expression. We say that that is not. Society taboos certain subjects from being a topic of art. Just because it is an artistic expression does not necessarily mean that we do not have the right to regret those kind of things if it had harmful impacts, if the harms significantly outweighs the possible benefits or whatsoever. We say that we can still regret those kind of things, even if it's an artistic expression. The first question I would like to ask in this speech is whether people will get influenced with these TV shows, because opposition side disagrees. The first thing about this question is on how will people get access to these shows, to these TV shows, particularly for teenagers, as opposition side frames most of these shows as R-rated. First, the adult access is clear, so I don't think I have to clarify this again. The Breaking Bad's on Netflix and adults can freely watch all these shows. So even if we say that the teenagers cannot watch it, the harms on the adults will also be clear as well. Then the second point is on teenagers. We had the framing of short form contents on YouTube exactly because we expected this response to come from opposition. The short clips from these shows like Breaking Bad are being posted on YouTube, especially because it is extremely entertaining, as both sides agrees in today's debate. But by the way, not all of these crime shows are R-rated as well. There are cut down versions of these shows, like how there is a PG-13 version of Deadpool, or how Seah just read a SparkNotes version of Deadpool, or how there's YouTube summary of TV shows like Narcos. Then, moving on to the actual contents of this debate about whether people will get influenced or not. Opposition side first tells you that these shows allow people to access the other side of the story, and that is a benefit in and of itself. Our question is, why exactly is understanding the criminal side of a story that important? All we get from seeing the Joker side or Walter White's side in Breaking Bad is that Joker murdered people because of how people treated him and mocked him, but that is not good enough of a reason for murder, killing a person's life. Or Walter White could pay his debt back through drug sales, yes, but he destroyed many other people's lives. I think that is the side of story that opposition side is missing in today's debate. And also, Seah's analysis is extremely accurate when she says that people in poverty commit more crime because they're forced to do so, because they have no choice to do so. This exact analysis can be used for our mechanism as well. That desperate nature of the poor people is what makes poor much more vulnerable for the glorification of crime within these TV shows. Because the poor people may get tricked, and they may think that their last option is to do things like drug sales, like Walter White. After watching Breaking Bad, they may steal and commit fraud, like in the movie Catch Me If You Can, and do all the other things because of their desperate nature. They say that crime is uncontrollable, but no, we say that with the actual accurate depiction in our world where shows portray crimes of criminal life as miserable, on the comparative, people get deterred away. On our world, when the criminals like Walter White is so depressed or miserable in the TV show, we say that the poor will not be incentivized incentivized to try the things that Walter White did.
Yeah.
These shows can work as a tipping point for the desperate poor people to commit crime or not commit crimes, and that is the reason why we say that this particular point is extremely important in this debate. Before moving on to the next point that they tell you about education, sure, I'll take your POI.
How in your world are you able to better address socioeconomic issues?
Well, exactly. Well, because our counterfactual was that rather than glorifying these criminal aspects of life, we would like to show them in a more realistic way, such as showing how miserable they are. Or if that is not a likely case, we would not depict these criminal lives at all. We say that not showing it is much better. And also about the socioeconomic issues, everyone knows that homelessness exists. That does not have to be a problem that's particularly addressed in TV shows. That can be addressed in the news shows, in news as well. So we don't think that that's an exclusive benefit that you take away. The next thing opposition tells you is that people aren't that gullible because they went through years of education. We reject this premise. If education is so effective to the extent that everyone gets rational after taking the mandatory education, we won't have any crimes in our society at all. Many educated people still commit crimes. Most of the financial frauds are made by well-educated people. But even if education is effective and people are somewhat rational, our impact wasn't limited to people simply following everything from the show. No, our impact was much bigger and much more likely as to why the perceptions will be formed in people's mind, where people do not think of these serious crimes like drug sales or murder as something that's very severe, right? Because they got to normalize it by watching or getting exposed to these kind of crimes constantly, thinking of those people, characters in Breaking Bad or Narcos as a cool character that they want to follow or watch. So what did we tell you regarding this likelihood? We told you about the subconscious effect on people by these TV shows. But the next and quick question is, how will these criminals be affected? This was pushed much by Seah, the previous speaker. They say that people will be able to feel empathy for the poor who had no choice but to commit the crime. We don't see why this point is particularly important. We only see this as a point of them endorsing crimes, justifying criminal actions, and therefore that is the exact kind of impact that we gave you in the first question that I asked. Because people will get to justify actions after watching Breaking Bad, we say that is bad. The other side of the story, the more important side of the stories, are the victims of the crime, the people who got killed by the Joker, people who got addicted to the drug because of Walter White. We should consider them more than the criminals. And because we do not want to endorse any sort of crime, but rather want a peaceful society, we're very proud to propose.
Panel, what population has been failing to do throughout the entirety of today's debate mainly is that I think they deem people as too gullible. I think they just deem people as very vulnerable people. We don't think this is the case in the status quo, right? Two things then in my speech. Firstly, I have two pieces of rebuttals for proposition, and I also found two clashes that I'll be presenting in my speech. Now, firstly, to the rebuttals. Firstly, they see that people think crimes are no big deal because of this glorification in such series. But to rebut this, I would like to say that we refuse this premise. The reason why we say we say that the reason why audiences feel bad while watching Breaking Bad in such series is because there are so many scenes that show characters going through extreme emotions and agony, and this looks like these characters screaming to get money until their faces turn absolutely red and crying alone in despair. So just from this claim, I think it's pretty clear that proposition has a misunderstanding of what these series look like. Down to the second one, they say that poor people are more vulnerable, and that's why we're going to regret these series. But I think at this point is a wash at best, because we bite the bullet that yes, this glorification may make poor people more vulnerable, but we still think that because these series also highly focus on the consequences as well, as I said just now, we think that these depictions of consequences can still de-incentivize poor people and can still convince them lifestyles are immensely harmful. Then two clashes I found in today's debate. Firstly, the impact on society, and second, which side better benefits the series creating industries. Then on to the first clash, which is about impact on society. Two layers on this. Firstly, let's just look at the individual level. Let's say I just want to reinforce the idea that we refuse the premise regarding how glorification harms vulnerable audiences, such as younger audiences, like the younger kids that are just not allowed to watch such inappropriate content. So we think that these cases just won't happen in our world, right? That's what we've been constantly pushing and emphasizing. It's because there are such as age limitations and these series being R-rated as well, and as well as adults telling young ones to not watch R-rated series, right? Then with that in mind, I think we can just reach a consensus that the main audiences are adults who are fully functioning, fully responsible members of society. Then why does this make all the harms from proposition ineffective? Two reasons. Firstly, these adults already know and are fully aware that there is glorification in these series and that this is pretty unrealistic and that criminal ways of lives are already just unrealistic and it's just wrong to live them, right? I think this is an obvious fact at this point that is will rarely be influenced by this glorification to harmful extents. But let's engage in proposition's case. So even if young audiences have access to such series, we think that these numbers will be very minor because, as I said, there are clear restrictions we already gave you, and it's also the parents' responsibility and it's clearly the parents' responsibility anyways to teach their children not to watch R-rated series and restrict children's access to inappropriate content. And second, most of these audiences, including adults and children, don't share similar problems or background stories as these criminals do in such series. They incentive to follow such characters. This is why glorification inherently does not have an extensive amount of harm if it has any, right? Then on the comparative, what benefit does our side exclusively provide? We think that the exclusive benefit is entertainment, and I think that's the biggest benefit you can give, given that we're talking about certain series, right? The entertainment then it's entertainment that can only come from the thrill and suspense from depictions of criminal ways of life. So why is this important? It's because we think that because individuals can get this exclusive entertainment, fundamentally their quality of life improves because they have entertainment, right? Then why is it the case that individuals can't get this kind of entertainment from other content? The reason why Breaking Bad, for example, was so popular and is agreed upon by the viewers that it's the best series of all time and whatnot, and why it's so popular these days, I think it's an undeniable fact that taking this into consideration, indeed, viewers really enjoy such content, and that's the exclusive point from our side, right? But I'll take that POI after this clash. Now, to the second layer. I'm going to be brief about this layer. It's reflecting on morality and ethics. So we think that audiences can reflect on such ethical dilemmas. As our DLO Sparno summary stated, the main character of Breaking Bad stepped foot into the world of crimes, but the intention was to provide for his poor family and leave money for his family. And I think this is a crucial point in like series like Breaking Bad, right? And this raises an ethical dilemma as a result of whether like crimes for good intentions are justified and whatnot. And we bite the bullet that yes, this benefit might be minor, but even that, I think it's an undeniable value that such series provide exclusively under our side. Then second clash is which side better benefits series creating industries, but yeah, I'll take that POI.
Yeah. Doesn't the fact that your deputy speaker and you yourself was gullible enough to endorse Walter White and justify drug sales by saying that he tried to feed his family make it clear that there are negative effects of people justifying and normalizing crimes?
Well, I don't think we refuse that premise. I don't think me and Sel will suddenly like step foot into the drug business just because we saw Breaking Bad. We refuse that premise. Down to the second clash, which side better benefits the series creating industries? So let's just take a look at the societal level, right? So we think that inherently there's going to be more freedom that's allowed for the directors and scriptwriters. So what does this look like? It promotes a diversity of content and embraces even negative and serious content, such as series that glorify living criminal ways of life, right? We gave you examples of Breaking Bad and whatnot. Then why is this diversity so important? I think there's the main reason why this is important is because it allows room for creative innovation. So that is to say, embracing such diversity sparks creative innovation in facets like storytelling, character development, and plot lines. So by drawing from a wide range of cultural influences, we think that it just draws a wide range of cultural influences and perspectives, and this allows creators to offer fresh and original narratives that captivate and engage audiences in new ways. Then why is this exclusive benefit from our side so important? It's because just recognize how creativity and innovation provides much more entertainment that audiences cannot otherwise find in other types of content, but also recognize that one of the main purposes of content creation and series is to provide entertainment. That is to say, it will be beneficial for the content creating industry when we are able to embrace certain series that may seem severe, such as, again, Breaking Bad, right? So why is this exclusive under our side? When we disallow such content, we think that it largely limits certain talents to thrive. For example, the creators of Breaking Bad are undoubtedly talented in depicting criminal ways of life, and this ensures realism and entertainment, which adheres in this industry, right? And however, the comparative is that on proposition side of the world, such talented creators wouldn't be able to use their talents, whereas we secure diversity of content and hence more innovation in this industry. And again, this is important because it fulfills the essential purpose of providing entertainment to audiences, right? So for all these reasons, very proud to oppose.
Throughout the speech, we see major flaws. Throughout the debate, we see major flaws within the proposition team. Number one, they have a misconception of what the status quo and crimes actually look like. In both worlds, crimes are evident. But from the very first speech, we already told and proved to you why we're better able to address the socioeconomic issues. With the glorification panel, this is exclusive to our world. We're able to at least tell the audience what this reality looks like. This is the behind the scenes where people are much more prone to crimes, and because people have no choice but to ultimately be titled as a criminal because of their socioeconomic position that they're in. Notice, even if government tells us that they're able to protect the most vulnerable, panel, it's more important. We think that addressing or at least making the public known that because you're a criminal, because you stole things in the market, you're a bad guy with bad, unethical morals. But the media can also tell actual possible behind the scenes what actually happened. The other side of the story can be more empathetic or at least consider the other reality. And notice that they're counterfactual to realistically portray the criminal way of life or to not show the criminals from the first place both is bad. Now, realistically portraying we see is much less likely. Movie industries need to profit as much as possible. This means that in their world, public are used to seeing superhero, the protagonist, always killing and destroying the bad antagonist to be more in the public's favor. Depicting criminals as more bad and less attention to have actual possible reasons to the behind. And they misunderstand why people are so gullible, that people do everything that they see on a Netflix series. Now, this is important. People don't jump into the drug industry because they see Breaking Bad, because they somehow get motivated by Walter when he's trying to earn money for his family so that they can sustain a life after he dies. Now, here's what we told you as opposition in response. TV shows like Breaking Bad only glorifies this crime-filled lifestyle. It doesn't encourage it. On the contrary, it depicts it as a nightmare to be avoided, a cautionary tale. We've seen how much the meth business systematically has the main characters in Breaking Bad breaks them down and their gory deaths and ends. Although the criminal got everything he wanted, he got money and fame and respect, it cost him everything, like his human relationships and the loss of his humanity during it. We have told you that this is the trend within these R-rated crime TV shows. This is the kind of show, of course, that we cannot show to very young kids. But even if, like they keep saying, teens get access to it, we don't think that it's completely bad, since we keep telling you they can see the negative repercussions of doing drugs and the reality behind it. Now, the proposition's main point is that just by doing because something is doing more harm than good to society, that they have the right to regret and remove it. They say that just by watching media, that everyone will get influenced and start copying what they see. Well, if that is the case, then child pornography should also be completely non-existent in their world as well, since it does so much harm and children can technically get access to it very easily. This is already banned, but people still watch it, and it's against the law, but people still do it, and therefore that should also be banned. So they haven't completely proved to us why their stance is not true. Their stance is not only not true, but it also does not make sense. Note that Breaking Bad or any kind of series that the government wants to title as glorifying, they do not go up to the audience and say, please join in the drug industry, and it's okay to commit murder and commit genocide because the movie of the actor pretended to do so. This is not what reality looks like. With all respect, look at the status quo. This is not what the world looks like, and therefore we think that the ballot is clear, because on our side as opposition, we not only have good benefits, like people in society being able, if we go with their stance that everyone gets influenced by what they see. In our world, at least, everyone will be able to know and think about the other side of society, and they'll be able to think about, oh, they did something bad, but what were the intentions behind it? And they'll be able to think in a more 3D way about the things that people do, because not everyone is we're not born with one personality. We're not either good or bad people. Every decision that we make is influenced by something else that we normally cannot control. But on their side, we see that they do not have any real benefits, and they also have a lot of harms on their side, and therefore I think we win this debate. Thank you.
Even if people watch shows as entertainment, when people watch shows that glorify crime for hours and hours, it's likely that viewers will be unconsciously brainwashed, like the opposition side, into thinking that these crimes can be committed if the villain family is poor and if their family is suffering from poverty. No judge. We think that all kinds of crime is not tolerable and should not be glorified. So proud to propose. The metric for this debate is simple. We need to prove to you why the harms outweigh the benefits, and then we prefer the latter of a world where TV shows portray a criminal life as terrible. Before anything, I just want to point out the irony in the opposition case. They tell us that people are not gullible to have the effects we told you. At the same time, they justify Walter White's action that he was just trying to feed his family. As our whip clearly mentioned, trying to feed a family cannot be justification for destroying the lives of many others. The fact that opposition themselves were justifying crime throughout this debate simply goes on to prove our point that the subconscious negative effect of TV series is clear, that people normalize crime. We don't need the other side of the criminal story. We need more of the victim story. Crimes are not tolerable in any scenario, although opposition seems to disagree. So what does opposition tell us? I think two issues on top of opposition. First, they assume that all people are rational and that all TV shows somehow include both sides of criminals. And I told you in my speech, if people in the South Korea were so rational and quivered at the side of violence, that is a utopian world where people live without crimes. So opposition's uncharitable response that only adults have access to these series and their attempt to mitigate the number of teens who watch the media was already dealt with in my speech, which both Jiseo and Bill also tackled. But note that the beauty's weak response that it is the parents' responsibility does not mean that children will have access to these TV shows. And note that Elo's examples of Justin Bieber on music video, Maleficent, and child pornography are totally irrelevant given that the motion states series. I think opposition should look a little bit more into what these series that glorify crime life actually look like. Let's look at some benefits from side opposition. When they talk about artistic expression, I think this is largely irrelevant in today's debate, but still, Bill told you that it has not much absolute value and is easily outweighed by all our crimes on like how this normalizes criminal crime, right? But second, they talk about empathy and like a more perspective. These already told you that there are parents and there are other ways to teach this. Morality and teachers know how to listen to both sides of the story, and it's better on our side as we don't use crime to make sure people understand diverse perspectives. And even if we teach that crimes have like two stories, we think it's toxic as there are other harmful perspectives that easily blur away the focus of diverse perspectives in the film. Also, not that people don't watch TV shows to learn diverse perspectives, but watch to have fun. And Bill also gave even if analysis that even if people understand the poor people's perspective, it is inherently bad because poor people can now justify robbing a bank because they're simply poor, as opposition says, and which they learn in TV shows. This is a tangible harm on side with the glorification of crime life. But let's look at some harms we gave you. Our side only shows criminals like bad sides. The public thinks more about like social injustice. Like opposition suggests that there is a necessity to understand social injustice, but we already told you that no such situation should be justified crime because they're simply poor. We think that regardless of how poor you are, it is still wrong to put on others by selling noxious drugs that could kill them and ruin people's lives. So since people in poverty are so desperate, that means that they will be influenced to also commit crimes and live as a criminal hated by society for the rest of our world. This proves that on our side exclusively, we deter people in poverty or like teenagers being peer pressured for drug stealing, aka the people that are on the brink of crime, because we alone show the consequences and impacts of criminal action, the stigmatization, the hatred by society the moment you opt into crime. But we also told you that showing the realistic life of criminals or like not depicting criminal crimes are better. As Bill told you, everyone knows that homelessness exists and it doesn't need to be exclusively addressed in TV shows. And our entire first argument was about why all stakeholders are vulnerable to the influence of glorification of the media, and opposition completely ignored our analysis on this and tries to argue that it's somehow good because you empathize with them, but we already told you that this is not the case. Therefore, our argument on negative influence still stands, proving a tangible harm of the narrative that normalizes and justifies crime. As though Elo herself also said, crimes due to poverty are symmetrical on both sides, and the difference is that the glorification of these series leads to people thinking that are not poor or have the excuse that publishing assumes that all TV shows portray opted to crime. This makes killing maybe your ex-girlfriend justified for the sake of revenge. But though that our point is that like it's not that people watch TV shows to learn how to do crime, but they watch TV shows for fun, and in the process they learn that the crime is fun due to glorification. Therefore, we reject a world where crime is justified. So proud to propose.